It's interesting. We've been doing some surveys of hesitancy in recent months, and one of the questions that we ask people is, when you're thinking about getting vaccinated, are you going to get it as soon as you can? And about 20% of people will say yes. Are you thinking not to get it at all? Really, you don't want to get vaccinated? That's about 10% of people. So that's 20 plus 10 is 30. The other 70% say they're going to wait and see what happens. Maybe other people go first, and then they're going to decide based on whatever they hear in the news about any side effects, or if it all seems fine, what's happening with COVID. So that 70% will say are hesitant. They're not against it, but at the same time, they're not enthusiastically registering and going to get vaccinated. They may be waiting. And I don't know exactly what they're waiting for. We haven't asked, and I don't know if they would necessarily know what they're waiting for. Maybe they're just not ready psychologically, or they just don't want to be first because they're worried about maybe the side effects of vaccination, and just not that concerned about the risk of COVID. So one of the things that we've done very well in Hong Kong is reducing the risk of COVID over the past year. So we've only had 10,000 confirmed cases in a population of 7.5 million. That's a really small fraction. It's much less than 1%. So actually a lot of us don't face the risk of getting COVID. We haven't faced the risk of getting COVID in the past year. In the next year, we may not face it. When we choose to get vaccinated, it's often to protect us against getting an infection. But if our risk is really, really small, then I can understand why a lot of people think it's not necessary to get vaccinated. But what maybe they haven't thought about is that until a lot of people get vaccinated, we won't be able to go back to normal. And I've seen some commentaries published in local newspapers expressing the idea that an individual who wrote the commentary doesn't see why they should be vaccinated if other people aren't, because unless everybody's vaccinated, we can't go back to normal. But that's a strange way to think about it, because unless you go first, you're not going to be able, the community as a whole is not going to be able to go back to normal. So it's up to all of us as individuals to make that choice. But then collectively, if we all choose to get vaccinated, then we can go back to normal. There's definitely a role for media to play in maybe sharing with people that the vaccines are very, very effective and also very, very safe. There's really minimal rate of any serious side effects of all the vaccines that we're using in Hong Kong, and they're highly effective vaccines. Someone who gets vaccinated will be protected to a very high level against getting severe COVID, won't die of COVID if they've been vaccinated. And at the same time, if a lot of people get vaccinated, then we'll have this community benefit where the infection won't be able to spread in the community anymore. But what we've seen in recent months in the media is sometimes some scare stories about something that may or may not be linked to vaccination, and also complaints about some technologies or other technologies. There's been some news about how some governments might only respect some vaccines but not others. And that's true whether it's the Chinese government or governments in Europe or the North America, that they'll only respect vaccines if they're from certain types or certain places. And that's not really helpful, because in Hong Kong, the main priority is to get to a high level of vaccine coverage. It's okay to have a mix of vaccines, but what we want is that high coverage.
The number of adverse events, because these vaccines are being so closely monitored, has been really highlighted in the media. And I think in some cases this is quite irresponsible, because we don't want people to become scared of a vaccine when the virus is so much worse. So unfortunately, some people have died after recently having a vaccine. But whether that is related to the vaccine effects or the natural causes that humans do die is currently being investigated. I think that the actual rate of the events that have been seen in vaccinated people with the general population is the same or lower. So I think it's because these vaccines are under a spotlight rather than them having detrimental effects themselves. So again, the virus response is much nastier and worse than having a vaccine. And if we have, in Hong Kong, we're in a place where there's low circulation of the virus. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't get vaccinated because you're afraid of a vaccine side effect. The vaccine side effect that we can expect is that local inflammation, that local production of an immune response. But to think that you're going to die from training your immune system, they're two separate events. So the coagulation, blood clotting type factors these are also in older people that have those responses naturally. So it's not necessarily because they had the vaccine, it's because they're that population that needs the vaccine that you're seeing some of these events happen. And we're looking at these people under a spotlight to monitor for those adverse reactions. But I think that these coagulation events are actually separate from the vaccine response. And I think it's really important that that doesn't get amplified further. What I'm worried about is that people will take these headlines against the viruses as a reason to not get vaccinated. When if you don't get vaccinated, you will get infected. And the effects from this virus is really quite nasty. So it's so important that we all get vaccinated, and we need to do this as a community because that's how viruses really spread through an unvaccinated population. So I hope that everyone can have these safe and effective vaccines. We've seen over 400 million doses of these vaccines given. So what would be my message to people that are apprehensive to become vaccinated? I would say, please get vaccinated. The SARS-CoV-2 vaccines are an incredible promise of what we need for the future, and we can only do this all together. If you don't get vaccinated, you will become infected. Your immune system is not ready to fight this virus, and that's why you need to be vaccinated. So vaccination is free and available here in Hong Kong, and we're so lucky that we have all these doses available that it's your choice to get vaccinated. And if you're choosing not to do that, then you're also prolonging this reality of restrictions and distancing and closures and quarantine, and I don't think we can continue on like this. So we really need everyone to get vaccinated. Hundreds of millions of people have been. If you're waiting and seeing for more vaccine side effects, these are incredibly rare events. They're very unlikely to happen, but if you don't get vaccinated, you will get infected. So take the chance now while we have these vaccines so widely available in Hong Kong.